A Moonlight Fable by HG Wells. There are many references to plants and insects in A Moonlight Fable. Let's review some vocabulary relating to plants, insects, and birds before we begin reading the story. Match the following words to their correct images below. Crickets, moth, havers, nightingales, goosegrass, duckweed, burrs. Before we read, let's check our understanding of some of the words that we will hear and read in this story. Match the words to their correct meanings. 1. Hastening. 2. Infinite. 3. Smiting. 4. Thridding. 5. Astonished. 6. Transfigured. 7. Brooding. 8. Vesture. These are the answers to the vocabulary check of the insects, plants, and birds. Did you correctly match the following words to their images? Let's check. A is duckweed. B, burrs. C, havers. Havers is an old English name for what is now called oats. D, goosegrass. E, nightingale. F, moth. G, cricket. Let's make sure that you understand the words that we will hear and read in this story. Let's check to see if you match the words to their correct meanings. 1. Hastening means to move hurriedly. 2. Infinite means limitless, endless in space. 3. Smiting, to strike with a heavy blow. 4. Thridding, to pass through like a thread or a needle, to course through a wood. 5. Astonished, it means to be amazed, stunned. 6. Transfigured, it means to transform, to change into something more beautiful. 7. Brooding, it means to appear dark, menacing, with unhappy thoughts. 8. Vesture, it means your clothes, your dress. Let's start reading A Moonlight Fable by H.G. Wells. There was once a little man whose mother made him a beautiful suit of clothes. It was green and gold, and woven so that I cannot describe how delicate and fine it was. And there was a tie of orange fluffiness that tied up under his chin, and the buttons, in their newness, shone like stars. He was proud and pleased by his suit beyond measure, and stood before the long looking-glass when first he put it on, so astonished and delighted with it that he could hardly turn himself away. He wanted to wear it everywhere and show it to all sorts of people. He thought over all the places he had ever visited and all the scenes he had ever heard described, and tried to imagine what the feel of it would be if he were to go now to those scenes and places wearing his shining suit. And he wanted to go out forthwith into the long grass and the hot sunshine of the meadow, wearing it, just to wear it. But his mother told him no. She told him he must take great care of his suit, for never would he have another nearly so fine. He must save it, and only wear it on rare and great occasions. It was his wedding suit, she said. And she took his buttons and twisted them up with tissue paper for fear their bright newness should be tarnished. And she tacked little guards over the cuffs and elbows, and wherever the suit was most likely to come to harm. He hated and resisted these things, but what could he do? And at last her warnings and persuasions had effect, and he consented to take off his beautiful suit and fold it into its proper creases and put it away. It was almost as though he gave it up again, but he was always thinking of wearing it and of the supreme occasion when someday it might be worn without the guards, without the tissue paper on the buttons, utterly and delightfully, never caring, beautiful beyond measure. One night, when he was dreaming of it after his habit, he dreamed he took the tissue paper from one of the buttons and found its brightness a little faded, and that distressed him mightily in his dream. He polished the poor faded button and polished it, and if anything, it grew duller. He woke up and lay awake thinking of the brightness a little dulled, and wondering how he would feel if perhaps, when the great occasion, whatever it might be, should arrive, one button should chance to be ever so little short of its first glittering freshness. And for days and days that thought remained with him, distressingly. And when next his mother let him wear his suit, he was tempted and nearly gave way to the temptation just to fumble off one little bit of tissue paper and see if indeed the buttons were keeping as bright as ever. He went trimly along on his way to church, full of this wild desire. For you must know his mother did, with repeated and careful warnings, let him wear his suit at times, on Sundays for example, to and from church, when there was no threatening of rain, no dust, nor anything to injure it, with its buttons covered and its protections tacked upon it, and a sunshade in his hand to shadow it if there seemed too strong a sunlight for its colors. And always, after such occasions, he brushed it over and folded it exquisitely, as she had taught him, and put it away again. Now all these restrictions his mother said to the wearing of his suit he obeyed. Always he obeyed them, until one strange night he woke up and saw the moonlight shining outside his window. It seemed to him the moonlight was not common moonlight, nor the night a common night, and for a while he lay quite drowsily, with this odd persuasion in his mind. Thought joined onto thought like things that whisper warmly in the shadows. Then he sat up in his bed, a little suddenly, very alert, with his heart beating very fast, and a quiver in his body from top to toe. He had made up his mind. He knew now that he was going to wear his suit as it should be worn. He had no doubt in the matter. He was afraid, terribly afraid, but glad, glad. He got out of his bed and stood a moment by the window, looking at the moonshine-flooded garden and trembling at the thing he meant to do. The air was full of a minute clamor of crickets and murmurings, and of the infinitesimal shouting of little living things. He went very gently across the creaking boards, for fear that he might wake the sleeping house, to the big dark clothes press wherein his beautiful suit lay folded, And he took it out, garment by garment, and softly and very eagerly tore off its tissue paper covering and its tacked protections, until there it was, perfect and delightful, as he had seen it when first his mother had given it to him a long time, it seemed, ago. Not a button had tarnished, not a thread had faded on this dear suit of his. He was glad enough for weeping, as in a noiseless hurry he put it on. And then back he went, soft and quick, to the window, and looked out upon the garden, and stood there for a minute, shining in the moonlight, with his button twinkling like stars, before he got out on the sill, and, making as little of a rustling as he could, clambered down to the garden path below. He stood before his mother's house, and it was white and nearly as plain as by day, with every window blind but his own shut like an eye that sleeps. The trees cast still shadows like intricate black lace upon the wall. The garden in the moonlight was very different from the garden by day. Moonshine was tangled in the hedges and stretched in phantom cobwebs from spray to spray. Every flower was gleaming white or crimson black, and the air was a quiver with the thridding of small crickets and nightingales singing unseen in the depths of the trees. There was no darkness in the world, but only warm, mysterious shadows, and all the leaves and spikes were edged and lined with iridescent jewels of dew. The night was warmer than any night had ever been, the heavens, by some miracle, at once vaster and nearer, and in spite of the great ivory-tinted moon that ruled the world, the sky was full of stars. The little man did not shout nor sing for all his infinite gladness. He stood for a time like one awe-stricken, and then, with a queer small cry and holding out his arms, he ran out as if he would embrace at once the whole warm brown immensity of the world. He did not follow the neat set paths that cut the garden squarely, but thrust across the beds and through the wet tall scented herbs, through the night stock and the nicotine and the clusters of phantom white mallow flowers, and through the thickets of southernwood and lavender, and knee-deep across a white space of mignonette. He came to the great hedge, and he thrust his way through it, and though the thorns of the brambles scored him deeply and tore threads from his wonderful suit, and though burrs and goosegrass and havers caught and clung to him, he did not care. He did not care, for he knew it was all part of the wearing for which he had longed. "I'm glad I put on my suit," he said. "I'm glad I wore my suit." Beyond the hedge, he came to the duck pond, or at least to what was the duck pond by day. But by night, it was a great bowl of silver moonshine, all noisy with singing frogs. Of wonderful silver moonshine, twisted and clotted with strange patternings, and the little man ran down into its waters between the thin black rushes, knee-deep and waist-deep, and to his shoulders, smiting the water to black and shining wavelets with either hand, swaying and shivering wavelets, amid which the stars were netted in the tangled reflections of the brooding trees upon the bank. He waited until he swam, and so he crossed the pond and came out upon the other side, trailing, as it seemed to him, not duckweed, but very silver in long, clinging, dripping masses. And up he went through the transfigured tangles of the willow herb and the uncut seeding grass of the farther bank. And so he came glad and breathless into the high road. "I'm glad," he said, "beyond measure, that I had clothes that fitted this occasion." The high road ran straight as an arrow flies, straight into the deep blue pit of sky beneath the moon, a white and shining road between the singing nightingales, and along it he went, running now and leaping, and now walking and rejoicing in the clothes his mother had made for him with tireless, loving hands. The road was deep in dust, but that for him was only soft whiteness, and as he went, a great dim moth came fluttering round his wet and shimmering and hastening figure. At first he did not heed the moth, and then he waved his hands at it, and made a sort of dance with it as it circled round his head. "Soft moth," he cried, "dear moth, and wonderful night of the world, do you think my clothes are beautiful, dear moth? As beautiful as your scales, and all this silver vesture of the earth and sky?" And the moth circled closer and closer, until at last its velvet wings just brushed his lips. And next morning they found him dead, with his neck broken, in the bottom of the stone pit, with his beautiful clothes a little bloody and foul and stained with the duckweed from the pond. But his face was a face of such happiness that, had you seen it, you would have understood indeed how that he had died happy, never knowing the cool and streaming silver for the duckweed in the pond. The end. This is the end of A Moonlight Fable. What are your first impressions of the story? What is the feeling you are left with reading the last lines of the story? What did you find beautiful about this story? Are there any parts of the story that you did not understand? There were many references to flowers, grass, insects, and birds throughout the story. Do you know these flowers? Connect the names of the flowers to their correct images. Mallow, lavender, mignonette, bramble, southernwood, willow herb. Now let's talk about alliteration, repetition, and similes. Throughout the story, H.G. Wells successfully uses alliteration, repetition, and similes to tell his tale and describe feelings, moods, and imageries of landscapes. Here in this example, H.G. Wells uses all three literary techniques in one sentence so beautifully, I think. Thought joined onto thought, like things that whisper warmly in the shadows. A. Can you identify where is the alliteration? B. Where is the simile? C. Where is the repetition in this sentence? If you'd like to, maybe challenge yourself and write similes, alliterations, and sentences with repetition in them for practice. The use of similes, as and like, in English literature. Similes, as and like, are often found in English literature. They are used to make indirect comparisons. It's a literary technique, when used skillfully, can convey poetic meaning, give the story greater depth, and broaden descriptions of different objects and subjects. H.G. Wells uses similes very successfully in this story. Consider the following examples. 1. The buttons in their newness shone like stars. So how beautiful must the buttons on a coat be, on a suit be, if they would shine like stars? So here the writer compares the buttons to the shining of stars in the night sky. 2. It was white and nearly as plain as by day, with every window blind but his own, shut like an eye that sleeps. Here H.G. Wells talks about the windows of the house in the night that was shut like an eye that sleeps when it's shut. The trees cast still shadows like intricate black lace upon the wall. Can you see it in your mind? How the shadows of the trees in the night looked like black lace upon a wall? Can you see the various imageries conveyed here? These are examples of beautiful writing, I think. So please read or listen to A Moonlight Fable again and see how many more similes you can find throughout the story. The use of repetition in English literature. Repetition is another technique used in English literature to emphasize and clarify the meaning of something. It can help to illustrate greater depth of meaning. Observe how H.G. Wells uses repetition in this story, such as in these examples. He must save it, and only wear it on rare, great occasions. He obeyed, always he obeyed. The moonlight was not common moonlight, nor the night a common night. Thought joined unto thought, like things that whisper warmly in the shadows. He was afraid, terribly afraid, but glad, glad. So do you see how the use of repetition of the same words emphasizes the meaning? However, it's not repetitive and used too much, but enough just to emphasize the meaning, to create a certain atmosphere through language. You could go through A Moonlight Fable again and see how many more phrases or words that are used in repetition throughout the story, if you'd like. Now let's check for your comprehension of the story, your understanding of A Moonlight Fable. Reflect on the story and answer the following questions correctly. 1. What is the main character's name? 2. Why did the mother only allow her son to wear his suit on Sundays? 3. How did the man get out from his bedroom to the ground below? 4. What made him awaken and go out from his room to the pond, do you think? 5. How did the man die? 6. How would you have ended the story? Write a conclusion to the story in about 5 sentences. How would you write it differently from HG Wells? The answers are at the end of the video. So these are the answers to the names and pictures of the English flowers. Were you able to connect the names of the flowers to their correct images? Let's check. 1. Mignonette. 2. Southernwood. 3. Bramble. 4. Willow herb. 5. Lavender. 6. Mallow. Let's check your answers now to the reading comprehension questions. 1. What is the main character's name? We don't know. It's not told to us in the story. He's referred to as the little man by the writer only. Why did the writer do this, do you think? 2. Why did the mother allow her son to wear his suit only on Sundays? Because she wanted to protect the suit and keep it clean, and because it was not raining or dusty on those days, and the suit would not get dirty. 3. How did the man get out from his bedroom to the ground below? He climbed through his bedroom window and down alongside the outside walls of the house. What made him awaken and go out from his room to the pond, do you think? He was enchanted by the moonlight and was in a kind of a waking dream, it appears. 5. How did the man die? He may have slipped and broke his neck, then he may have fallen into the stone pit, or he broke his neck when he fell into the stone pit. The young man died happy, feeling and believing that strands of moonlight dripped from him and his beautiful suit, rather than the wet duckweed plants that clung to him. Thank you for reading this story with us. We hope you enjoyed H.G. Wells's beautiful writing as much as we did. We look forward to reading more stories with you soon. Thank you.